Hey, glad you're here. Today's stories walk the line between unbelievable and unforgettable. One starts with a thunderstorm and ends in something close to resurrection. The other begins with a dream and ends at a cave filled with the dead. A man is struck by lightning. His heart stops. And then, right as hope fades, a woman in black appears and demands to touch him. In another tale, a grieving man digs up the only people who ever showed him kindness and keeps them like family. Who was the stranger with the Bible? And how far would you go to never feel alone again? At 5:15 on the evening of June the 28th, 1980, a 38-year-old man named Robert Davidson was cruising along Interstate 74 near Acton, Indiana, with his wife Wanda riding behind him on the motorcycle. Her arms were wrapped tight around him. The couple wasn't out for fun. They were trying to reach family before a major thunderstorm hit. Overhead, the clouds had already turned slate gray, and heavy drops had begun smacking Robert's arms. Knowing they were about to get drenched, Robert pulled the bike to the shoulder so they could throw on rain jackets. Wanda got off first. Robert was just about to do the same when a burst of white exploded in his vision, and his entire body locked up. His muscles seized. He crumpled straight to the pavement. Then nothing. Within 5 minutes, an ambulance was on scene. One of the responders was a woman named Kimberly Coe. She'd been told the basics. A man and his wife had pulled over, and the man had been hit by lightning. She rushed to Robert and saw immediately. He was in trouble. His skin looked waxy. He wasn't moving. Wanda was frozen in shock, crying beside him. Kimberly dropped to the ground and felt for a pulse. Nothing. They had maybe a few minutes to bring him back. Kimberly focused on stabilizing his neck while another responder began CPR. A third radioed in for a medevac helicopter. They got a quick reply. The chopper was on its way. Then everything stopped. No warning, no smoke, no spark. The ambulance just shut off. Engine, sirens, lights, equipment, dead. That was terrifying because some of the gear they needed to keep Robert alive required power from the vehicle. This shouldn't have happened. Ambulances were built with backup systems, 2 batteries, in case one failed. Both batteries dying at the same time? Unheard of. But before they could figure it out, something else happened. A figure appeared on the road. A woman in a long black dress sprinting toward them. She was waving a Bible above her head and yelling, "Let me touch him! I can save him!" No one had any clue who she was. Not the paramedics, not Wanda. The highway was empty otherwise. This woman just appeared. But the ambulance was dead, and Robert wasn't breathing. No one had anything to offer except hope. So when the woman ran up, they didn't stop her. She knelt beside Robert and started praying. Calm at first, then louder. Then she began slamming the Bible on the ground and shouting at the sky, demanding that this man be spared. The responders, Wanda included, stood in stunned silence. Then her voice changed. She didn't sound like herself anymore. She spoke words no one understood. Maybe a language, maybe gibberish, maybe something else entirely. The moment she stood up and turned away, the ambulance powered back on. Lights, sirens, engine, and Robert gasped for air. His heart started. His color returned. He was breathing. Moments later, the helicopter arrived. Robert was loaded in and flown to the hospital with Wanda beside him. The responders stood in silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. And the woman? Gone. The road stretched for hundreds of feet in both directions. On one side, nothing but flat, empty field. No place to hide. But she had vanished. Only later would they learn that the field she'd disappeared into used to hold the Acton campground, a Methodist revival site in the 1800s, known for loud prayer and speaking in tongues. The same rituals the woman performed. The place had burned to the ground twice and was never rebuilt. Some now believe she was a spirit, tied to the land, drawn out to help one more time. No one has seen her since. Let's shift now to the second story. It begins in a remote part of China, where silence isn't just peaceful, it's survival. And it ends inside a cave, where 5 beds are perfectly made, and the people in them haven't taken a breath in years. One night in February of 2011, a man in his 30s named Yang sat quietly eating dinner with 5 elderly women. The table was still. Not a single word was spoken, but that wasn't strange. Yang had trouble speaking due to a disability he'd had since birth. It also left him blind in one eye. Most of his life, he'd been shunned and made fun of because of how he looked and how he struggled to communicate. But these 5 women, his aunts, had always been kind. They didn't mind that he barely spoke. They loved him, and he loved them. He made it his duty to care for them. He made sure they were fed, safe, and comfortable. After dinner, Yang cleared the table, helped one of the women to her bedroom, tucked her in, and went to help the next. That's when he heard something he had never heard before. Sirens. Living in a village so isolated it didn't even have its own police force, Yang had never heard or seen anything like it. Out of curiosity, he stepped outside. His home was set on a hill. At the base, roughly 600 feet away, 2 police cars sat with lights flashing. He walked cautiously down the road, stopping before he got too close. Speaking made him anxious, and police made him nervous. He didn't want to draw attention or be forced into a conversation he couldn't manage. So he stood and watched. The 2 officers had been sent there after a local farmer called in a disturbing story. He sat on the roadside, face in his hands, sobbing. His words came out in pieces until finally one of the officers calmed him down and asked him to start from the beginning. The man said he'd been having nightmares. Every night for a week, he saw his mother trapped in darkness, screaming for help. Each time he got close to her in the dream, a shadow would fall across her, and she'd vanish. He'd wake up in a panic, heart racing, unable to shake the feeling that something was wrong. At first, he brushed it off. He wasn't a superstitious guy, but the dreams kept coming. Same images, same terror. Finally, he couldn't ignore it anymore. He went to visit his mother. She wasn't there. She was missing. And her grave had been disturbed. Terrified and convinced she'd been abducted, he called the authorities. Though skeptical, the police responded. And now they were here. After hearing the full story, they told the farmer to go home. They'd organize a proper search. Yang, still standing quietly nearby, watched the cars drive away. Back at the station, the police split into 2 teams. One would search the nearby city. The other returned to the village, going door to door, asking if anyone knew what had happened to the farmer's mother. It was during this that someone came forward. They said they had seen a strange sight. Yang, days earlier, carrying what looked like a body wrapped in cloth up the hill. Officers returned to Yang's home. The front door was wide open. They knocked. No answer. The place was dark. "Yang?" they called. No reply. They stepped inside. The air was musty. Trash and dirty dishes covered the floor. Wooden boards creaked underfoot. Each room was eerily silent. They moved slowly, calling out his name. Still nothing. Finally, they reached the last room. This one had several beds, 5 to be exact. Each one was perfectly made. Each one had an old woman lying still beneath the covers. At first, the officers assumed the women were asleep, but that didn't make sense. They'd been shouting for minutes. Anyone alive would have woken up. They checked the beds. All 5 women were dead, and not recently. The tip they'd gotten, the one that led them here, was true. But not in the way they'd expected. Yang hadn't harmed these women, not at all. In fact, he'd spent years caring for them. But the truth was more disturbing than violence. These women weren't Yang's relatives. They weren't his aunts. They were local women from the village who, while alive, had shown him kindness when others ignored or ridiculed him. Over time, each of them had passed away naturally. And each time one died, Yang couldn't bear the thought of being alone again. He'd felt abandoned and invisible for most of his life, except when these women were around. So, instead of grieving and letting go, he acted. One by one, Yang returned to their graves after dark. He dug them up. He wrapped their bodies carefully and carried them back to his home, which wasn't really a house at all. It was a cave he had converted. Wooden planks covered the ground, and makeshift beds were arranged side by side. Each woman had her own space. He dressed them, laid them out gently, and treated them as if they were still alive. He cooked meals for them, talked to them, tucked them in at night. When the farmer began having those terrifying dreams about his mother, he didn't know that his mind was sensing a deeper truth, that her body was no longer resting where it should be. And when he visited her grave, the coffin was empty. The police now understood everything. Yang wasn't a monster. He was a man so isolated, so desperate for connection, that he went to unimaginable lengths to hold on to the only affection he'd ever known. Authorities took Yang into custody. He was not sent to prison. Instead, they transferred him to a psychiatric facility for treatment. The women's remains were respectfully reburied. And after that, the farmer's dreams stopped. Completely. So now I want to hear from you. What do you make of this? Did Yang's actions come from love, loneliness, madness? These stories remind us that the human heart, whether in grief or faith, can lead people to places no one expects. Whether it's a stranger reviving a man with a Bible in hand or a silent caretaker living among the dead, emotion sometimes overpowers reality. The message here? Connection matters. Isolation can break a person. But even when things feel impossible, help and healing are always possible. If this episode moved you or chilled you, hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who's drawn to stories that sit at the edge of the unbelievable. See you in the next one.